I knew something was wrong the moment my front porch started feeling empty. Not messy, not disturbed, just empty. For 3 long months, packages kept vanishing from my doorstep in Maple Ridge Estates, a quiet little neighborhood just outside Cedar Hollow, Missouri. At first, I told myself it was random. Work gloves, phone chargers. Annoying, but replaceable. Then my son's birthday gift disappeared. That one hurt. I only get him on weekends, and watching his excitement slowly turn into confusion and disappointment lit a fuse in me I didn't know I had. Here's the part that still makes my stomach turn. I had it all on camera. Clear footage, bright daylight. No hoodie, no rushing. The same woman every time, calm, confident. Clipboard tucked under her arm like a badge of authority. Sharon Whitmore, the HOA head, walking up to my porch like it belonged to her. When I took the footage to the police, they waved it off as a civil HOA matter. The board didn't even bother watching the clips before siding with her. That's when it clicked. This wasn't theft. This was power. And Sharon had been abusing it for years because no one ever pushed back. So I stopped replacing stolen packages and sent myself one final delivery, one that would expose her to everyone. If you want to hear more true stories like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button to HOA Gone Wild, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? When I first pulled into Maple Ridge Estates, I honestly thought I'd found the one quiet corner of the world that wasn't trying to grind me down. The streets were clean, the sidewalks were straight, and every lawn looked like it had been measured with a ruler. The neighborhood sat just outside Cedar Hollow, the kind of small Missouri town where people wave at red lights and the diner waitress remembers what you drink after one visit. After my divorce, that kind of calm felt like oxygen. I'm Ethan Cole. I work with my hands. I'm a licensed electrician, the guy people call when the lights keep flickering or when a breaker box smells like burnt plastic. Work is steady, but life had been anything but. The divorce didn't just split a marriage, it split my schedule, my home, my sense of control. My son, Lucas, only comes over on weekends. Those 2 days are everything to me, and I was determined that when he walked through my door, he'd feel safe, happy, and proud of where his dad lived. Maple Ridge looked like it could give me that. At least, that's what I told myself. The truth was, Maple Ridge wasn't peaceful. It was controlled. Quiet in the way a room gets quiet when someone important walks in. The kind of quiet where you can feel people watching, but nobody wants to be the first to speak. On my first week, I started noticing things that didn't feel normal. The same neighbor trimming the exact edge of his grass every evening like he was afraid to stop. Someone repainting a mailbox the same shade of black like it was a life or death emergency. Curtains twitching when I parked a little too close to the curb. Then I met her. Sharon Whitmore didn't introduce herself like a neighbor. She introduced herself like an inspector. She showed up at my driveway on a bright Tuesday afternoon, standing there in pressed clothes with a clipboard and a smile that never reached her eyes. She had neat hair, neat nails, and a neat little pen that clicked like a warning. Behind her, parked perfectly at the curb, was a spotless white sedan that looked like it had never seen a muddy road in its life. "Welcome to Maple Ridge Estates," she said, eyes scanning my front yard like she was checking for problems. "I'm Sharon Whitmore, HOA board leader." Board leader. Not neighbor, not Sharon from down the street. She said it like a title. She handed me a folder so thick it could have been a college textbook. Rules, guidelines, fine schedules, trash can placement, grass height, paint colors, fence materials, the type of lighting allowed on your porch. The kind of rules that make you wonder who has time to care. "I like to do a friendly walkthrough with new residents," she said, still smiling. "Just to keep everything consistent." I nodded, because I didn't want conflict. I wanted normal. I wanted Lucas eating pancakes at my kitchen table without feeling the weight of adult problems hanging over him. So I smiled back, thanked her, and promised I'd follow the rules. Over the next couple of weeks, I kept seeing Sharon, always moving, always patrolling, always with that clipboard. She'd drive slow down the street in that white sedan, like she was hunting for something wrong. If I stepped outside to take out the trash, she'd be somewhere nearby, watching like she was recording it in her head. Once, I caught her staring at my porch light, and she made a note on her paper like my house had personally offended her. Still, I tried to stay positive. Some neighborhoods have strict rules. I could live with that. I dealt with tougher people on construction sites. The HOA couldn't scare me. And then the packages started disappearing. At first it was so small, I didn't even let myself get mad. A pair of work gloves I ordered, a phone charger, a pack of outlet covers I needed for a job. Annoying, sure, but I told myself it was porch pirates. It happens. People get desperate. Maybe the drivers were leaving boxes too close to the sidewalk. Maybe a teenager thought it was funny. I filed one report online, shrugged it off, and adjusted. I started timing my deliveries. I told drivers to tuck boxes behind the porch cone. I even made sure I was home when I could be. But I'm an electrician. I'm out on calls. I'm in crawl spaces and attics and half-finished buildings. I can't sit at my window all day guarding cardboard. Then one afternoon, I was heading inside when I noticed Mrs. Lynn Park shuffling up her walkway across the street. She was older, always in a sun hat, always tending to her little garden like it was the only calm thing left in her life. When she saw me, she hesitated, then waved me over like she didn't want anyone else to hear. "You missing things?" she asked, voice low. I blinked. "Packages, yeah. A few." She looked around quickly, like the trees might be listening. "You didn't hear it from me," she whispered, "but Sharon's been helping herself. She thinks she can because she runs everything." I actually laughed at first, not because it was funny, but because it sounded ridiculous. Sharon? The HOA board leader? The woman who printed rules like they were scripture? I wanted to believe Mrs. Park was confused, or mistaken. Or maybe she'd had a bad interaction and was just venting. "I'm sure it's just porch pirates," I said. "People stealing around the holidays, you know." Mrs. Park's face didn't change. She just gave me a sad little nod like I'd said something she'd heard 100 times. "Just be careful," she whispered. "That woman doesn't lose." That should have been my wake-up call. It wasn't. I went back to my routine. Work. Bills. Laundry. Cleaning up the house before Lucas came over so it didn't look like a single dad was barely holding it together. I tried to ignore the feeling that Maple Ridge wasn't as friendly as it looked. And then the stakes changed. Lucas's birthday was coming up, and I'd ordered him something he'd been talking about for months. Not cheap, not replaceable. The kind of gift you plan for, save for, and feel proud to give your kid because it says, "I'm still your dad, I still show up, I still care." The delivery notification hit my phone while I was at a job across town. It said, "Delivered." I finished up as fast as I could and drove home with a stupid grin on my face, already picturing Lucas ripping it open with that wide-eyed excitement kids get when they think the world is still good. I pulled into my driveway. My porch was empty. No box, no package. Nothing but the doormat and the same quiet street pretending nothing had happened. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the spot where it should have been, feeling something shift inside my chest. It wasn't just anger, it was humiliation. Powerlessness. The sick realization that someone in this perfect neighborhood had looked at my house, my life, and my kid and decided they could take whatever they wanted. That was the first time I stopped believing in fairness. And it was the first time I started thinking about proof. I didn't go to the HOA meeting looking for a fight. I went because I still believed, stupidly, that if I showed up with facts and spoke calmly, someone would listen. The meeting was held in the clubhouse at the center of Maple Ridge Estates, a beige little building that smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee. Folding chairs were lined up in neat rows, and about 24 residents sat quietly, staring forward like students waiting for a lecture to end. Sharon Whitmore sat at the front table, perfectly composed, clipboard resting beside her like a gavel. To her right was Rick Bowman, a thick-necked guy with crossed arms who never seemed to blink. On her left sat Elaine Torres, who kept her lips pressed tight and nodded along to whatever Sharon said before she even finished speaking. They weren't a board. They were a wall. When the floor opened for resident concerns, I stood up and introduced myself. I explained the missing packages. I mentioned that one of them had been my son's birthday gift. I kept my voice steady even though my hands were clenched so tight my fingers hurt. I asked if the HOA had any guidance or if security footage from the neighborhood cameras could be reviewed. Sharon didn't miss a beat. "Well, Ethan," she said, smiling sweetly, "delivery theft is unfortunate, but it's really a personal responsibility issue. Packages shouldn't be left unattended. Perhaps you could arrange to be home or pick things up yourself." A few people shifted in their seats. Nobody spoke. I told her I had cameras. I told her I had footage. I offered to show it right there. She waved her hand dismissively. "We're not here to review personal videos. That opens us up to liability." Rick Bowman leaned forward. "Sounds like porch pirates," he said. "Happens everywhere." Elaine Torres nodded immediately. "Yes, unfortunately, that's not an HOA matter. That was it. No questions, no review, no curiosity. Just a neat little dismissal wrapped in polite language." Sharon thanked me for bringing it up and moved on to the next agenda item like my son's stolen gift was no more important than a crooked trash can lid. I sat back down feeling like I'd just been told to shut up without anyone actually saying the words. The meeting ended the way all meetings like that do. People stood, whispered to each other, and avoided eye contact. A couple neighbors gave me sympathetic looks, but nobody said anything out loud. Sharon packed up her papers, smiling, already victorious. That night, I kept replaying the meeting in my head. The way Sharon didn't even pretend to consider the evidence. The way the board backed her instantly, like it was rehearsed. That's when an ugly thought settled in. This wasn't ignorance. This was protection. A few days later, that thought turned into certainty. I was coming home from a long job when I saw Sharon and her husband, Carl Whitmore, unloading groceries from their car. Carl was laughing about something, relaxed, comfortable, and on his feet were a pair of work boots that made my stomach drop. They were mine, same brand. Same scuffed toe on the left boot. Same distinctive stitching I remembered because I'd complained about the price when I bought them. I'd worn those boots on job sites, through mud and dust, until they were broken in just right. And now they were on his feet like they'd always belonged to him. I walked closer, heart pounding, and pointed. "Hey, where'd you get those boots?" Carl barely hesitated. "Oh, these?" he said casually. "Picked them up a while back. Don't remember where. Online, I think." The lie slid out too easily, too smooth. Sharon didn't even look surprised. She just watched me, eyes sharp, like she was gauging how far I'd push it. I wanted to shout. I wanted to rip them off his feet and show everyone the worn-in shape that matched my own stride. Instead, I nodded and walked away because I finally understood what I was dealing with. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't opportunistic theft. This was a system. Sharon stole. Carl benefited. The board covered, and anyone who questioned it got shut down. The retaliation started almost immediately. The first notice showed up taped to my door like a warning label. Trash cans left out 15 minutes too long. Fine pending. The next day, another notice. Mailbox paint not compliant with approved shade. Then a letter about lawn height measured down to fractions that only someone obsessed would care about. I started getting emails. Formal, cold. Citing sections of the HOA handbook I hadn't even known existed. Each one ended with the same sentence: continued non-compliance may result in further action. Further action. The phrase hung in the air like a threat. I watched Sharon drive past my house more often after that, slower. Her eyes flicking to my yard, my mailbox, my porch. Once, she actually stopped and wrote something down while staring directly at my front steps. She wanted me to know she was watching. It was obvious now. I'd embarrassed her by questioning her authority. I'd stepped out of line by asking for accountability. And this was how Maple Ridge dealt with people who didn't stay quiet. What really got to me wasn't the fines or the notices. It was the message behind them. You don't belong here. You don't get to question us. We can take what we want, and you can't stop it. That night, after I put Lucas to bed, I sat alone at my kitchen table, the stack of violation letters spread out in front of me. My porch camera feed played silently on my phone, looping over empty space where packages used to be. That's when it fully sank in. This HOA wasn't broken. It was working exactly the way Sharon designed it to. And if I wanted this to stop, I couldn't rely on meetings, or fairness, or anyone in that room. I was on my own, and I was done playing nice. I wish I could say I slammed my fist on the table or stormed into another meeting after that. I didn't. I did the opposite. I went quiet. Not because I was scared, but because anger was exactly what Sharon expected from me, and anger makes mistakes. I needed something better than that, so I treated the situation the same way I treat a bad electrical system. I stopped guessing and started documenting. Every missing package went into a notebook. Date, time, delivery confirmation, screenshot, camera angle. I pulled footage from my porch camera and backed it up in multiple places. I wrote down how long boxes sat outside before disappearing. I logged when Sharon's white sedan drove past my house. I noted when she stopped, when she got out, when she walked up my steps like she had every right in the world to be there. I wasn't trying to prove a feeling. I was building a record. Within a week, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Packages vanished only during certain hours, always when I wasn't home, always after Sharon had been seen making her rounds. I synced delivery notifications with camera timestamps and highlighted the overlaps. It wasn't random. It was routine. While I was at it, I started reading the HOA handbook again, not skimming it like before, but really reading it. Line by line, section by section. The same rules Sharon loved to enforce on everyone else. That's when I noticed something interesting. Her own house didn't comply. Her trash cans were visible from the street outside approved hours. Her porch light was brighter than allowed under the ambient lighting clause. Her lawn edging exceeded the maximum boundary in several places. Small things, sure, but those were the same small things she'd fine me for. The same rules she treated like gospel, so I documented those too. Photos, measurements, dates, everything neat and organized. Once I had enough, I did exactly what the HOA claimed to value. I submitted an equal enforcement request. I included my documentation. I quoted the handbook. I didn't accuse. I didn't insult. I simply asked that the rules be applied consistently as outlined in the HOA guidelines. The response came back less than 24 hours later. Request denied. No explanation. No review. Just a short email stating that enforcement decisions were at the discretion of the board and not subject to resident challenge. That was the moment I stopped thinking of this as a personal fight, because after that email went out, something else started happening. People started knocking on my door, not during the day, not when Sharon was likely to be patrolling. It was always in the evening. Quiet taps, nervous glances over shoulders. The kind of behavior you see when people are afraid of being seen. The first was Megan Alvarez. She lived 2 streets over with her husband and twin toddlers. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, one hand gripping her phone like it was a lifeline. She didn't even sit down at first. "I heard you were having trouble with packages," she said quietly. I nodded. Her voice cracked when she told me what had been taken from her porch. Diapers, formula, baby medicine. Things that don't just cost money, but time and sleep and sanity when they disappear. She showed me delivery confirmations, photos of empty porches. One blurry image from her door camera that showed a familiar figure walking away with a box tucked under one arm. Sharon. I didn't say anything, Megan admitted. I was scared. She already fined us twice for noise complaints, and my kids barely even cry. After Megan came Harold Jenkins, retired. Lived alone. Spent most of his time fishing when his knees allowed it. He brought a folder of his own, yellowed papers and handwritten notes. Inside were receipts for expensive fishing gear that had gone missing over several months. Rods, reels, equipment he'd saved for over years. I thought I was losing my mind, he said. Kept thinking maybe I'd misremembered delivery dates. Then there were others. A couple who lost prescription supplies. A single woman who had kitchen appliances vanish. Always the same story. Always the same timing. Always the same person showing up on camera, confident and unafraid. The pattern was undeniable. Sharon didn't steal from everyone. She stole from people she thought wouldn't fight back. Elderly neighbors. Young parents. People living alone. People too busy, too tired, or too afraid of fines and retaliation to make noise. By the end of that week, my dining table was covered in paperwork that didn't even belong to me. Statements, photos, videos, delivery records, loss estimates. It was bigger than my porch. Bigger than my son's gift. What really changed me was Mrs. Lynn Park. She came by one evening with a small paper bag in her hands. Inside were empty prescription bottles and shipping labels with her name on them. Medical supplies that never arrived. Things she needed, not wanted. I thought if I stayed quiet, she would leave me alone, Mrs. S. Park said, eyes downcast. I was wrong. That night, after everyone left, I sat there staring at the pile of evidence and felt something shift inside me. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about justice for me. This was about stopping someone who had built a system around fear and silence. Sharon Whitmore wasn't just stealing packages. She was stealing peace from an entire neighborhood. And for the first time since this started, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. The camera showed up the next morning. I noticed it the second I stepped onto my porch. A small black dome mounted high on the corner of Sharon Whitmore's house, angled just enough that there was no confusion about what it was watching. My front door. My porch. The exact spot where packages kept disappearing. She hadn't even tried to be subtle about it. Later that day, an email landed in my inbox from the HOA. Sharon's name sat neatly at the bottom. It explained that the board had approved a temporary security enhancement to deter theft in the neighborhood. Funny how that enhancement only covered my house. Funny how it appeared right after I started documenting everything. That was Sharon's message to me. I see you. I'm watching, and there's nothing you can do about it. She was wrong. If Sharon wanted surveillance, I could do surveillance. I just wasn't going to do it her way. I spent that evening installing additional cameras around my property. Not cheap, store-bought ones, but professional-grade equipment with multiple angles, night vision, and cloud-back storage. Front porch, driveway, street view. Even a discrete angle that captured the sidewalk without crossing any legal lines. Every feed synced automatically. Every clip time-stamped. Every file backed up where no one but me could touch it. Within days, the footage stopped being frustrating and started being damning. I caught Sharon in the act. Not once, not twice. Over and over again, walking up like she owned the place, glancing briefly at her own camera, as if checking to see whether it was recording, then lifting the package and walking away at the same calm pace she always used. Sometimes she didn't even take the whole box. She'd open it right there, pull out what she wanted, and leave the rest behind like trash. Other times she carried it off under her arm, already confident no one would challenge her. Watching it happen in real time did something to me. It burned away any doubt that had been left. This wasn't impulse. This was routine. She had done it so many times that it barely registered as wrong anymore. Then I noticed something else. Sharon didn't always go straight home. One afternoon, after she took another package, I watched her drive past my house and keep going. I checked the time, made a note. The next day it happened again. Same route, same timing. Always after she made her rounds, so I followed at a distance the next time, careful not to be obvious. She drove to a row of storage units on the edge of town, the kind with faded numbers and security lights that buzz at night. I parked far enough away to avoid attention and watched as she unlocked a unit and rolled the door up. Inside were tables. On those tables were piles of open boxes. Shipping labels torn off and stacked in a crate. Discarded packaging stuffed into black trash bags. I zoomed in with my camera and felt my stomach turn as I recognized names, addresses. Neighbors I knew. Neighbors who had trusted this place to be safe. I recorded everything. Over the next week, I gathered footage from different days, different angles. Sharon unloading boxes. Sharon sorting through items. Sharon tossing what she didn't want into the trash like it meant nothing. The operation was clean, organized, and practiced. This wasn't a secret stash. It was a workflow. Then she crossed a line I didn't think she could come back from. Mrs. Lynn Park had been waiting on a delivery of medical supplies. Nothing fancy. Prescription items she needed to manage her health. She told me she'd been watching the tracking updates like a hawk because missing even one delivery could cause serious problems. The notification said delivered at mid-afternoon. By early evening, Mrs. Breasty Park knocked on my door, shaking. "It's gone," she whispered. Again, I pulled up my camera feed immediately. There was Sharon. Same calm stride, same clipboard tucked under her arm. She lifted the package, glanced around, and walked away. But this time, instead of taking it to the storage unit, she stopped halfway down the block. She opened the box right there on the sidewalk, rifled through the contents, and frowned. Then she dumped the rest into a nearby trash bin. I watched it happen on my screen, my hands trembling. Medical supplies. Prescription items, thrown away like expired coupons because they didn't suit her. That was the moment something in me snapped into place. Until then, part of me still wanted to believe Sharon was just a bully drunk on authority. A control freak who liked enforcing rules and flexing power. But that footage erased any lingering doubt. She wasn't just stealing. She was choosing who deserved security and who didn't. Who mattered and who didn't. She was deciding, quietly and confidently, that vulnerable people could be exploited because they were unlikely to fight back. I saved that clip in 3 different places. When I showed it to Mrs. Mest Park, she covered her mouth with her hand and started crying, not loudly. Just silently, like someone who had expected better from the world and been proven wrong one too many times. That night, I sat alone watching the footage again and again. Sharon in daylight, Sharon on camera. Sharon sorting through stolen property like it was her personal store. This was no longer about HOA rules. It wasn't even about stolen packages. It was about stopping someone who had turned authority into a hunting license. And for the first time since this began, I knew exactly what Sharon was. Not a bully, a predator. And predators only stop when they're exposed. By that point, I knew I couldn't afford to guess anymore. What I had was disturbing, but I also knew how easily people like Sharon twisted narratives. One accusation turns into another misunderstanding. One video becomes taken out of context. If I was going to stop her, it had to be done cleanly, legally, and in a way she couldn't talk her way out of. That's when I called Diane Mercer. Diane lived a few towns over and had retired from the police force years ago. She'd spent most of her career working property crimes and fraud, and after retirement, she'd become a private investigator for hire. Calm voice, sharp eyes, sharp eyes. The kind of person who listened more than she spoke. When I showed her the footage, she didn't react the way I expected. No shock, no disbelief. Just a slow nod. "This isn't porch piracy," she said finally. "This is organized theft." She explained it in simple terms. Repetition, pattern, targeting, origin, sorting, disposal. The moment Sharon started warehousing stolen items and selectively keeping what she wanted, it crossed a line. This wasn't petty crime anymore. It was a system. And systems leave trails. That was the confirmation I needed. With Diane's guidance, we started doing things the right way. I reached back out to the neighbors who had already spoken to me and asked them to put their stories in writing. Dates, items, estimated value, screenshots of delivery confirmations. Any footage they had, no embellishments. No emotional language, just facts. The pile grew fast. Diapers, formula, prescription supplies, tools, fishing gear, kitchen appliances, small electronics. Dozens of missing deliveries, all pointing back to the same person. Diane helped me organize it into a clean timeline and estimated the total losses. The number made my stomach drop. This wasn't hundreds of dollars. It was tens of thousands. Still, Diane warned me not to rush. "Evidence is good," she said, "but catching someone in the act is better." That's when the idea of the package came up. I didn't want anything dangerous. I didn't want anything that could hurt someone or give Sharon even the smallest opening to play victim. What I needed was identification, something that would mark the thief in a way no explanation could erase. The solution was surprisingly simple. I built a die marker package. Completely legal, completely non-harmful. Inside the box was a pressure-triggered release loaded with ultraviolet reactive powder, invisible under normal light. Impossible to miss under a basic UV scan, the kind of substance used by banks and retailers to identify stolen property and suspects. It wouldn't explode. It wouldn't injure anyone. It would just coat whoever opened the package and everything they touched afterward. And once it was on you, it didn't come off easily. Diane reviewed the design carefully and gave me the green light. No chemicals. No traps that could cause injury. No hidden blades or hazards. Just a marker, a signature, a true stamp. The next step was coordination. This wasn't something I could do alone anymore, and honestly, I didn't want to. The neighbors deserved to be part of ending this. We met quietly in my garage one evening. No HOA emails. No group chats. Just people standing together, tired of being scared. We assigned roles. One neighbor positioned cameras toward the street. Another covered the sidewalk angle. Someone else agreed to be ready to call the police the moment the package was taken. Diane stayed on standby, prepared to step in the second things crossed the line. We rehearsed it like a drill. The final piece was the bait. Sharon didn't steal everything. She stole what she thought was valuable, high-end items, electronics, medical supplies she could resell or discard without guilt. So we made the package look irresistible. Branded box, overnight shipping label, signature sticker. The kind of delivery that practically advertised worth. I ordered it to arrive on a day I knew Sharon would be making her rounds. Same timing she favored, same calm hours when most people were at work. The package sat on my porch like a dare. All we could do then was wait. I watched the live feeds from my phone, heart pounding harder than it ever had during any job I'd worked. This wasn't about catching someone doing something stupid. This was about exposing a pattern she believed made her untouchable. What struck me most in that moment was how confident Sharon had become. She wasn't sneaking, she wasn't rushing. She had done this so many times that she no longer saw risk. Authority had convinced her she was invisible. She had no idea the entire neighborhood was watching, and she had no idea that the next box she picked up wouldn't just disappear. It would end everything she'd built on silence and fear. The day everything finally broke open started quietly. Too quietly. I was watching the live feed from my phone while pretending to organize tools in the garage, every sense tuned to the street outside. The bait package sat on my porch exactly where Sharon liked it, centered, visible, impossible to miss. Then someone new appeared on the screen. A man I didn't recognize walked slowly past my house, pretending to be on his phone. He paused just long enough to glance at the package, then kept walking. A minute later, he circled back from the other direction. That's when I saw the subtle signal. A quick tap on his ear, a small nod toward Sharon's house. My stomach dropped. Sharon had sent someone ahead. The man approached the porch, crouched, and touched the box. Just enough pressure to shift it, not enough to open it. I watched as a faint puff escaped from inside, invisible to the naked eye but clear on the ultraviolet indicator built into my camera system. The die hadn't fully released, but it had marked him. He froze. Then he bolted. I didn't hesitate. I gave the signal, and one of the neighbors made the call. The police were already on their way before Sharon even knew something had gone wrong. From my feed, I watched the man reach the corner, panic in his movements now, wiping his hands on his jeans like he could scrub away what he couldn't even see. He disappeared from view just as Sharon's white sedan rolled into frame. She stopped across the street and sat there for a moment staring at my porch. I swear, even through the camera, I could feel her calculating. Something had spooked her. But arrogance has a way of overpowering caution, especially in people who have never faced consequences. She stepped out of the car, clipboard in hand, perfect posture. Same, calm walk she'd used 100 times before. She glanced once toward the corner where her scout had vanished, then straightened her shoulders and headed up my driveway. That was her mistake. She didn't knock. She never did. She bent down, lifted the package, and turned slightly to carry it away. The pressure shift was enough. The box detonated in a sharp burst, not loud, but sudden. A cloud of bright purple powder exploded outward, coating her hands, her arms, her clothes, and her face in an instant. The color was vivid, violent against her pale outfit. It clung to fabric, skin, hair. It drifted onto the sidewalk and into the open door of her car. Sharon screamed, not in pain. In shock. In disbelief. She dropped the box and staggered backward, staring at her hands like they belonged to someone else. She tried brushing the powder off, only spreading it further. Purple streaked across her blouse, her cheeks, her neck. When she stumbled into her car, the interior absorbed it too. Seats, steering wheel, door panel. Everywhere she touched, the evidence multiplied. That's when the doors started opening. Neighbors poured out of their houses like the neighborhood itself had been holding its breath. Phones came up immediately, cameras rolling, people filming from every angle. Someone laughed in disbelief. Someone else shouted, "It's her!" Mrs. Park stood at the edge of her driveway, hand over her mouth, eyes shining with something that looked a lot like relief. Sharon tried to regain control. "This is illegal," she yelled, her voice cracking. "I am the HOA board leader. You can't do this." She was still shouting when the police cars arrived. 2 patrol units pulled in fast, lights flashing. Officers stepped out and took one look at the scene. Sharon, covered head to toe in purple. The discarded package on the ground. A crowd of neighbors filming. The smell of panic in the air. She rushed toward them, talking over herself. "I was set up. This is harassment. I demand you arrest him." One of the officers raised a hand. "Ma'am, please step back." That's when Detective Allison Grant arrived. She didn't rush. She didn't raise her voice. She surveyed the scene once, took in the powder, the box, the crowd, and Sharon's frantic gestures. Then she spoke, calm and firm. "Everyone stay where you are," Sharon tried again. "You don't understand. I run this neighborhood." Detective Grant looked at her purple-stained hands and replied, "Right now, you're not running anything." I stepped forward and handed over the evidence package. Drives, logs, statements, footage, timelines, storage unit videos, the clip of Sharon throwing away Mrs. Park's medical supplies. Diane Mercer stood beside me, identifying herself and confirming everything had been collected legally. Detective Grant listened, watched, asked questions. Then she nodded once. Sharon was still arguing when the cuffs went on. "You're making a mistake," she kept saying as they led her to the car. "This will be reversed." No one answered her. As the door closed, the purple stains glowed brighter under the cruiser lights, impossible to ignore, impossible to explain away. For the first time since I moved into Maple Ridge Estates, Sharon Whitmore looked exactly like what she was. Exposed. And there was no clipboard in the world that could save her now. The aftermath didn't explode the way the moment of her arrest had. It unfolded slowly, piece by piece, like a curtain being pulled back on a stage that had been rigged for years. In the days after Sharon Whitmore was taken away, Maple Ridge Estates felt suspended in an uneasy silence. No clipboard patrols. No warning emails. No white sedan creeping down the street at a crawl. Just quiet that felt unfamiliar, almost suspicious, because we had all gotten used to being watched. The charges came first. Sharon didn't get the dramatic courtroom spectacle she'd always seemed to think she deserved. Faced with the footage, the witness statements, the storage unit records, and the dye evidence that tied her directly to the thefts, her lawyer advised her to plead guilty. Multiple counts of theft, abuse of authority, possession of stolen property. The list was longer than I expected, and every charge had a neighbor's name attached to it. The judge ordered restitution. Every victim would be repaid, not just for the value of the items stolen, but for related costs as well. Replacement fees, late charges, emergency purchases. Sharon was also barred from holding any HOA position ever again, not just in Maple Ridge Estates, but anywhere within the county. The authority she clung to so desperately was gone for good. Carl Whitmore didn't stick around to see the fallout settle. A week after Sharon's plea, he moved out. No announcement. No explanation, just a quiet exit. Divorce papers followed soon after. I heard through neighbors that Carl claimed he didn't know how bad it was, but nobody believed him. The image of him wearing my stolen work boots had burned itself into too many memories. Whatever story he told himself, he wasn't welcome anymore. The HOA couldn't pretend nothing had happened. The county stepped in and dissolved the existing board. Rick Bowman and Elaine Torres resigned under pressure, suddenly finding urgent reasons to be done with HOA involvement. An outside management firm was brought in temporarily to oversee operations, audit finances, and rewrite enforcement procedures. Transparency became the new rule, not an optional suggestion. Meetings were recorded. Decisions were documented. Residents were finally allowed to question authority without fear of retaliation. And something incredible happened once the fear lifted. People started talking. Neighbors who had lived side by side for years finally learned each other's names. People stood in their driveways and talked instead of rushing inside. Mrs. Park's garden became a gathering spot in the evenings, with people checking in on her and helping carry groceries. Megan Alvarez no longer whispered when she knocked on doors. She laughed again. Her kids played on the sidewalk without parents flinching at every sound. The culture shifted almost overnight. It wasn't perfect, but it was human. For me, the change showed up in ways I hadn't expected. Word spread fast in Cedar Hollow. People talk, especially when something dramatic happens. Suddenly, my phone started ringing more than usual. New clients, referrals from neighbors. Someone's cousin needed electrical work. A friend of a friend remembered my name from the story on the local news. Trust travels faster than advertising ever could. More than the work, though, it was Lucas who reminded me why this had mattered. The weekend after everything settled, he came home from school grinning ear to ear. "Dad," he said, dropping his backpack by the door, "I told my friends you caught a bad guy." I laughed and told him it wasn't like that, but he shook his head, serious. "You stood up for people. Mrs. Park says you helped everyone." That hit me harder than any fine or meeting ever had. Lucas started carrying himself a little taller after that. Like he'd learned something important without anyone having to lecture him. That you don't stay quiet when something is wrong. That rules don't matter if they're used to hurt people. That doing the right thing can be scary, but it's worth it. Maple Ridge Estates finally felt like what it had pretended to be when I first moved in. Not perfect, not manicured to death, but real. Packages sat on porches without disappearing. People waved without looking over their shoulders. Kids rode bikes without parents worrying about citations. One evening, I sat on my porch watching the sun dip behind the houses, a delivery box resting by my door, untouched. Mrs. Park waved from across the street. Megan pushed a stroller past my driveway. Someone down the block was grilling, the smell of smoke drifting through the air. For the first time since the divorce, since the move, since all of it, I felt like I belonged somewhere again. Maple Ridge Estates wasn't ruled anymore. It was shared. Looking back on everything that happened, the stolen packages almost feel like the smallest part of the story. What really shook me was how easily one person was able to turn authority into a weapon, and how long it worked simply because everyone was afraid to speak up. Sharon didn't last for years because she was clever. She lasted because fear kept people quiet and rules were used like armor instead of guidelines. I didn't beat her by yelling louder or fighting dirtier. I beat her by slowing down, documenting everything, and making sure the truth had nowhere left to hide. Cameras don't get intimidated. Timelines don't forget. And witnesses, once they realize they're not alone, become impossible to silence. Bullies hate sunlight, especially the kind that sticks and follows them no matter how fast they try to run. These days, my porch finally feels like mine again. Packages sit where they're delivered. No knots in my stomach when a notification hits my phone. No second guessing whether something will be there when I get home. Lucas laughs when boxes arrive now, like it's normal again, like it should have always been. And every time he does, it reminds me why I didn't back down. The neighborhood feels different too, lighter. People talk, people help each other. Fear doesn't run the schedule anymore. Maple Ridge Estates didn't need a ruler. It needed accountability. And if there's one thing I learned through all of this, it's that silence is the bully's best friend. Once you take that away, everything changes. If you want to hear more true stories like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button to HOA Gone Wild. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from?